Hi guys, welcome to Investing with JYK, and today we're going to talk more about Tesla, and it's going to be part one of a series of videos that I'm going to make with Tesla, regarding Tesla. And today we'll talk about Tesla's accounting. Some interesting thing that I discovered. So let's make this bigger. So this is from 2016, and this is the same page essentially in 2017. All right, let's look at what the difference is. You can see that they quote a couple of things, right? So they quote this profitability margin, the gross margin, which is what we look at for a growth company. You typically look at revenue growth and gross margin. So I think so here the way they accounted for gross margin is divide. Essentially, that's the gross profit of this entire segment. So I made a spreadsheet, and you can take a look at here. So 2016, the revenue was this number, right? So if we add up automotive and automotive leasing and service is another, that's a number. And that's the cost of revenue. So I basically copied all these numbers down, and you can see these numbers match exactly what they provide us with. So 23%, and then you got a 22.8 and 27.6. 20.9, 27.6. So that all makes sense. Now you look at here. That is not the same. That actually becomes here. So they now break out the gross profit margin total automotive, and then they separate out the services. So you can see once you include the services, it drops by significantly by 4% of revenue. So what is the deal with their services segment? So here's a couple of things that I noticed. You can see services revenue as a percentage of total revenue is increasing somewhat, but the cost increased quite a bit in terms of percent of total, right? And then the margin went from 10% positive down to 1%, down to negative, down to 23%. So like, what did you do there? So 2017, I don't see that many. So I don't really see them using that many more service centers. They might have built a bunch more, but in terms of actual cost, I don't see why it would go up unless either one, their cars were the quality problem of their cars show up, but their cars haven't been getting a lot worse, and typically the quality problems show up within the first year. So the total revenue for 2016 isn't drastically, it's like 50% higher. So what explains this, this crazy increase? Is like triple service costs. So so one of the things that I was able to find, which I dug a little bit deeper, was that if you look at this, I'm gonna make this into a 2-screen. Right, so you can see that for automotive sales, the margin is 21%, or it used to be like 28, and then it dropped 23, and now it's 21. It's not a good trend, but we understand in 2017 they started selling a few. Maybe it's because of Model 3s. They fetch a lower margin. We don't know. And look at the lease margin. How is this possible? Your lease margin is like almost, it's like here you get a 6% difference. Here you get like a 16% difference, and here you get a 10% difference, and here you get a 14% difference. So these are crazy numbers. Even though lease is a smaller a portion of the revenue, this is there's something going on here. So the way you can boost your lease margin is potentially you could say, okay, I could sell them at higher price, so you could like increase the capitalized cost or something like that. I'm not entirely familiar with how lease works, but I think there's one number that is at the discretion of the, well, two numbers really, at discretion of the auto manufacturer. So one is the residual value, and the other one is I think the total capitalized cost. And so if you set the sale price, like I think that's the total capitalized cost. Correct me if I'm wrong. I've only leased car once, and it was like in a hurry. But if you set that number higher, then the monthly payment will be a lot higher. Then there will be less incentive for people to lease. So in order to get people to lease and yet set a higher price, you need to make the residual value higher so that the portion of depreciation is smaller. Now that has consequences, because if your residual value is higher than what the market says 3 years after the lease is signed, then the manufacturer has to eat the loss. So then I started digging, like, where exactly does that money go? Now, where does that difference go? So what I found was that in services and other, right, so here it says revenue consists of maintenance services, sales of used vehicles, and sales of blah. I bet that's not like too much of a portion, because I doubt that many Teslas break in terms of their powertrain. I haven't heard that being a problem. So let's see. So what else is there? So cost of services include direct parts, material and labor costs. So those are the normal service. Overhead associated with the sales of electric vehicle. Powertrain components, also these basically just making the powertrain components that to other manufacturers, right? So the thing that they sell to other manufacturers, I don't know how much of that business they do. It's probably in the report. I haven't read the entire thing. But here is the interesting thing. You got cost to acquire and certify used vehicles. So the cost to acquire a lease is the residual value. Now, that just means all the excessive margin that they make on lease is going to show up in service 3 years down the road, basically. So I think that is a real, I think it's deceitful. Like, this number is pulling up their automotive, it's pulling up this number, right? It's pulling up this number at the expense of this number. You get a higher cost, and then you can see that's why I think that's why the service cost is exploding. And the reason they started breaking out this line in 2017 instead of 2016 is probably because this really doesn't look too good. 19% doesn't look too good on auto manufacturers. You may say, oh, but Ford and GM is shittier. Okay, so let's think about this. So that's the other thing I picked up. So I put up Ford and GM's numbers. So they, on paper, excluding these financial services, that's basically like financing. So Tesla, I'm not sure if they do financing. They probably have outside financing, but let's just consider the automotive revenue. So that includes both lease and sale. And then you got the cost of sales. Let's include the selling and administrative and other expensive in there as well. So that's like all the promotions and all that stuff. So we included there. So you end up with like 9% for Ford and 6 to 7% for GM for the recent years. I didn't bother to pull up the last year. But there's one difference is here you go. Oh, huh. Sorry, expenditure, I think it was called. Research expenditures and whatnot. Sorry, I used to have that pulled up. I don't know where that went. Okay, so I think it's somewhere here. Oh yeah, here we go. Engineering research and development. Oh god. The way they account for cost of sales is actually different. I don't know where that went. Here maybe? Here you go, yeah. Engineering, research, and development expenses, primarily salaries, materials, associated costs, are reported in cost of sales. So for Ford, this their total cost actually include R&D, and it's actually a lot. It's like they have a $7 billion in R&D. 2017 is $8 billion in R&D. So they spend a lot in R&D, and that is all going into this cost number. So if you back that out, that will have a significant change. So let's just try that. All right, so let's say if we just subtract, so 2017 we do 8 billion. So this is all in millions. All right, so we're gonna do 8 billion. Now suddenly their gross margin is 14%. Right, so you have to keep that in mind. And this is actually a convention in the automotive industry. So if you look at GM, they do the same thing. Research. It's probably gonna be somewhere down here, I suppose. No? Oh god. Let's see. Alright, here we go. Research and development expenditures, which are expenses incurred in automotive cost of sales. So that goes into cost of sales as well. So they spent $7.3 billion in here. So if we ever change this one to minus 7.3, well, 7300. So now their gross margin suddenly looked a lot better. Okay, but you say, so let's just keep those things here, okay? So you say, all right, but that's still shittier than Tesla's number, which is essentially 20, the entire, 18%. They're getting 18%. You're getting just 14, 13%. So Tesla should be worth more. Whether Tesla should be worth more or not, I don't know. But there's another accounting issue here. We all know that Ford and GM sell their cars through dealers. So the dealers actually get paid at least 8%. So yeah, I checked. I'm not sure how reliable this Jason Lancaster guy is, but he said gross margin is about 8 to 10% for full line automakers. So let's just take 8%. So actually, 8% goes to would go to the dealership on a new vehicle. So now you see that Tesla's gross margin isn't as high as it looks. And plus, if you look at Tesla's R&D, but obviously Tesla's a growth company, so their R&D is supposed to be a higher portion of revenue. But if you look at their R&D, this is and then put it into their revenue, basically accounting it the way traditional car companies account for costs, it's gonna be crazy. So let's say search, and actually we'll just consolidated income. No, they don't have any income. So let's get the balance sheet first. Actually, I can't find it. Sorry. Let's go to here. There we go. Oh, they just call it of comprehensive loss. Interesting. So here we go. Their R&D is a separate line item. So that's $1.3 billion. So if you put that in, that will reduce their gross profit by more than half. And their SG&A, part of the things that is also accounted for in, well, not G&A, but selling. I think in here, sorry, consolidated income statement. All right. Oh, actually, well, yeah, I actually put the SG&A into the total cost. So that's actually wrong. I should only put the selling cost. So the selling cost only involves, I think, just a couple $1 billion instead of the entire thing. Anyways, you get the idea. I messed it up, but you get the idea. Essentially, Tesla's gross margin numbers is inflated in multiple ways. Their automotive segments gross margins inflated even further. So the way they inflate their gross margin is by not including R&D. The way they inflate their automotive margin even further is by pushing the, potentially, I'm not entirely sure, but potentially by pushing the lease loss, well, the excessive residual value into the services cost, and making the gross margin on cars looking better. And these are very suspicious behaviors. So that's one. This is my today's video, so it's just gonna be on Tesla's accounting practices. I don't know if there are any other things, but this just looks bad form. So see you next time. So next time I guess we'll talk about Tesla's cash flow. Everybody's paying attention to their cash flow.